money doesn't make you good or bad. It just reveals who you already are. And I feel like hiring somebody remotely doesn't, it doesn't make, it's not good or bad. It just reveals your management style. If you're a good manager, you're going to thrive with overseas talent.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Purpose. My name is Chris Kiefer and I am here with Michael Murray, the founder and owner of Textbook Painting. They're outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And Michael, first of all, thanks for coming on again. I'm super pumped. I always look forward to our conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I love chatting with you, whether it's, certainly if it's being recorded, but definitely, when I run into you at an industry event or whatever, I always have something to learn from you. So I'm looking forward to it.
It's funny that you said certainly if it's being recorded, because I had this, there's like a running joke when I was at my past job of like everything that Chris does is recorded. And they're like, you're probably recording this right now, Chris. I'm like, actually, yep, there's going to be an AI transcription that will, summarize the conversation or whatever. But to me, I'm like, recording things is like, there's very few things that I would want not recorded, because I don't have a lot of most conversations. I'm like, I wish I could look back on that conversation that I had with so-and-so, But obviously it's like, I would like it to be recorded, but then I don't want everything publicly shared. There's a difference. But the idea of it being recorded so that it's accessible, if for some reason I wanted to reflect, or what did I learn in that, or what was I thinking at that time? I always enjoy that. So anyways, you came on, I don't even know, it was like 2 years ago. And we talked about just you starting the business and everything and running it for how many years ago did you start Textbook?
2006, so we're about 17 years ago now.
Yeah. And so today, one of the things that I think you and I share a big passion for technology, but also the virtual assistants, which I think are both of which are probably heavily underutilized in the painting world. But I would say most small businesses, I can't tell you the number of times that just in the last year that I've had conversations with people about virtual assistants. And just it's a awesome thing to leverage for specific tasks. But anyways, I think that's a good jumping off point. And I want to start that with one of the biggest things that I feel I hear from people that are considering it is when I say like, hey, have you ever considered a virtual assistant? There's one of two things happen. They either first go into, oh, I could never hire a virtual assistant, X, Y, because of what I do is so specialized, or it's so hard and they don't understand, whatever. Or the other thing is they go into a place of like fear that like I'm giving access to this person that I don't know, and then they're just going to like take all of my information, and there's going to be identity theft, and I'll be living under a bridge, and I won't have a family anymore. Just like they just are listing out this absurd like thing. I mean, it couldn't happen, yes, but that's where they immediately jump to, and I think that's it's kind of unfortunate that that's the disposition of most people, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll definitely comment on that because I've heard a lot of similar. I would say my journey is that for years I wanted to. This was like a cool concept. I remember when I first read the 4-Hour Work Week. It was probably not long after I started the company. 10 to 12, 14 years ago, whatever that would have been. I read that book and I was like, that sounds amazing, and like I wish I could do that, but like I'm not capable of doing that. It just seemed like one of those things that was like cool for somebody else, but not what I wasn't capable of it. But I was never afraid of the data, thing that you just mentioned, right? Like somebody's going to steal our data any more so than anyone else like coming into our company.
Yes.
But I think like some of that just stems from this idea, which, like I'm very like patriotic, but this idea that like if it's outside the United States, like it, there's I don't know, there's like more crime, or it's not like, there's like a scary element to that. Where
you think that's what people do think?
I think so. I feel like, because like I think that just stems from like, like if you ask like, well, why? Like what are the practical reasons why is somebody who can log into your system from, let's say, the Philippines any more likely to steal your data than somebody who's logging in from the office, or like your local city, they're working from home or whatever. And it's like, the reality is like they're not. It's not any. There's no real practical security concerns there. It's just like somehow we think, or we've been brought up to think that, if it's like somebody in a foreign country who's like, hacking into our data, like, or whatever, it's like you're just as likely to get hacked by somebody from the United States or whatever. So I don't know. I never resonated with that fear. But I certainly had like a lot of other concerns. And
and I'd say maybe it's not the fear of like they're going to steal my identity, but it's like the fear of how am I going to be able to rely on this person there? And I think that I can understand a little bit more, but I'm curious. This is obviously you've had, I don't know how many VAs you have hired over the years. Do you keep track of that? Not how many you have currently, but how many times you have hired a VA?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer both. So we currently have 4 full-time overseas team members. And I would say we've probably had, I think, about 4 or so others that didn't work out for one reason or another, and we can talk about those. But it's actually a pretty good batting average. It's probably higher than our, whatever local talent, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I would say the biggest thing whenever someone is, I love the conversation with the person who has actually tried to hire somebody and they're like, it just didn't work out. It was horrible. I'm like, oh, interesting. Tell me like what happened. Like, let's think about this. And so they go into it like, yeah, well, it was good communication. And then, there was one day they just stopped. We just never heard from them again or whatever. And then my thought is like immediately, depending on the person, I'm not like interrogating this person and like attacking their management style. But I'm like, how often would you talk to the person when you hired them? What was your cadence of like onboarding and stuff? Or what was the plan that you gave them? And they're like, oh, well, we didn't really know what we needed them for, really. It's like we kind of wanted them to like answer some emails and stuff. And it's like, okay. Like, so how frequently did you tell them or talk to them about this? And they're like, well, I don't even know. Maybe we probably talked a couple times in the first month. It's like, was it a video call? Like, oh, we just were on WhatsApp or something. It's like, okay, so let me ask you this. If you were to have been hired by an employer here in the US and your only form of communication was via text and it happened like twice a week, like, how committed are you to that boss? You know what I mean? Like, how trusting are you, like, that boss is still going to be there in 2 months, Because it's like there's no communication. So I feel like ultimately, not to say that there's good employees and bad employees, but it's the same exact thing with hiring people locally. It's like, are you a good manager? And like, do you have systems? Do you have a clear job description or a scorecard of like, what is this person expected to do? How will they receive feedback? What does good look like? What does done look like? And if you don't have that for a local employee, first of all, you have a little bit more grace because the person's literally showing up in front of your face every day to say, what do you need me to do? And there also is like inherent trust because I can see that you're alive and well and you look happy, so the business must be doing good. But when there's not that, and now you're totally dependent on digital communication, you have to fill that gap with good tools and processes and systems to make that work.
100%. Yeah, no, it reminds me, I agree with everything you just said. It reminds me of that, like, cliche, if you will, that like money doesn't make you good or bad. It just reveals who you already are. And I feel like hiring somebody remotely doesn't, it doesn't make, it's not good or bad. It just reveals your management style. If you're a good manager, you're going to thrive with overseas talent because you communicate well, you put them in a position to do well. Like you said, clear expectations, clear, steps of what they're supposed to be doing, hopefully documented, what good looks like, all the things that you just described. Every management book that's ever been written, you could just put like, with overseas talent or with VA under the title and just republish it and make a lot of money because it's the same thing. Maybe we should. I think you and I
Great
should come out
idea.
with that.
There's probably some public domain books that we can find about management.
Yeah, how to win friends and influence people overseas talent.
There you go. I'm going to actually have my VA start working on that.
There you go. That's ninja level.
So, yeah, what else from like what would you say looking back has made you successful, or why are you still an advocate and continuing to find tasks to delegate overseas? What has been the reason that you guys have been successful outside of processes,
Yeah.
or what other tips, tricks, tools, softwares? Like, how are you making this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think it starts, so like tips, tricks, tools, let's get to all that. But I think it starts with having the right mindset. I would say like the right mindset is don't hire helpers. I would encourage you, if you're hiring, if you own a painting company and you're looking to hire your first team member ever, like if you're calling it a helper, then we've got issues. Like that's not going to work. But if it's a job that somebody could want, it's a painter, it's a crew leader, it's an office manager, whatever that is, okay, like we could probably work from that. So I think it's like I don't think it should be I don't think a VA should be seen as a like I give you tasks and you do tasks. For two reasons. One, I don't think that's a job that most people want for a long-term role, and so you should expect a good amount of turnover. And two, I don't know that it's like ultimately serving the owner, the manager, the business owner or whatever in that, because ultimately, like, I don't want to have somebody who's like, okay, what do you want me to do next? It's like I've got my own stuff I'm working on. Like I can't just keep responding to that.
Love that.
So I mean, we have like the 4 people that work at Textbook Painting right now that are overseas. They all are in the Philippines. Have like specific job, like a specific job. One is a sales assistant, and her list of responsibilities includes responding to inbound lead inquiries that we get through the website. She does a lot of like text message based conversations with clients and leads and potential clients. She does a lot of CRM management and keeping things organized, because I don't know if it's just our sales reps, but they're not always the best at using the CRM and keeping that up to date. Right. So she's got a list of things that she's doing. One of the things that so anyway, so let's get to some of these like tools and otherwise. One of the things that
I just want to emphasize that one of the things I think that you said that was so critical was not hiring helpers. I can't tell you the number of times that like a virtual assistant, even that it could be, I should say the title virtual assistant could be a job depending upon how well you define that. But I love the mindset of I need to make sure that I'm giving a like ownership of something to this person. And again, I think that you could start out with like, I have a bunch of tasks that are repetitive and I need to get this off my plate so I can just at least think. But I think it's also very wise of you to say, how many people want to just be like a task checker for an extended period of time? And I think that's interesting because in my personal experience, the first person we hired was a virtual assistant that did a bunch of random things, very like scattered, but there was processes and like, we need you to do this once a week. And then happens every day. You check this for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at the end of the day. And it was defined. But then once we realized that this person is dependable and reliable, then we're like, hey, do you think rather than me telling you that this needs to be done, could you just like look at the email or receive the form and then just decide how you want to handle it? And then the power, like the game changing part is that when she came to us and was like, hey, I know you need me to do this. I understand that, but you asked me to do it this way. Is it okay if I do it this other way instead because it's faster? And we're like, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And keep doing that. And then make us a video on your new process.
Yep.
And we'll save that in our library of tasks. But again, I just think that I just love the mindset of, if you're just like, I just need a helper to just like do my biddings, It's like, okay, who finds someone anywhere that wants that job for more than a couple months as like just a holdover till they find a better job, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where, it can be very like entry level, if you will, right? It can be checking the emails and responding to the inquiries, but giving somebody like pride in their job, and helping them understand like why is this important, again, is core management philosophy. This isn't, personally, I actually don't even like the term VA. It works. I think it is. It often is like the first term because it helps everybody like have a common language. But even in this conversation, I've already started, like, I will use overseas talent or remote employees, because like to me that is more of what it is. I think VA has this, like, unfortunately become like a negative connotation of, menial task helper, not high level. That has not been my experience. If anything, it's my experience. I'm like consistently just impressed by the level of education, the level of like reasoning, decision making, and
work ethic. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it blows my mind. I mean, this is one story that I think is, to me, it's like, I'm sure you've encountered situations like this with your remote employees. I'm going to start using that. I like that way more than virtual assistants. But with remote employees, a friend of mine who was one of the core people that got me to like try this out, he has a inspection company, home inspection, and he had two VAs. He hired one, and she was answering phones and stuff for them, scheduling all the inspections. And then they wanted to expand their hours, so that he hired two that were shifting their work days and times. So one would work in the morning and the other one would cover later in the afternoon. And the one managed the other. So the first one actually managed the second one, which is another great idea for, again, same exact principle for local employees. But what was crazy, he was telling me this story of his one, I don't remember what her name was, we'll call her Julie. Julie calls him up and says, "Hey, Tyler, I know I'm supposed to work until 1, but I was wondering if it would be okay if I left now. I did call Susan, the other employee, and she's going to cover for me. So the phone will still be answered, but I'm just curious if you're okay with that." And he's kind of like, I mean, yeah, that sounds fine. What's going on? Why is this even happening? And she was like, "My sister was in a car accident and she's at the hospital and I want to go see her." And he's like, "Okay, first of all, go.
Right.
Second of all, I'm blown away that you, prior to doing this, you found out your sister was in a hospital and then you were like, I better get my job covered and my shift covered before I just leave." In this, like, and I would say, I don't even know if it's like, I almost was like sad when I heard that. Like in America, it would just be like, "See ya, boss. Like, I have more important things to do." And it's true. That is much more important than answering the phone. And I'd probably forgive you as long as this wasn't a recurring thing, But it's like the fact that she had the care or the, whatever integrity, whatever that is, to take pride in like, this is so important that I'm going to make sure that someone covers me before I even ask my boss. So it's like all the things that happen there of solving her own problem, having the whole thing planned before going to the boss, instead of being like, "Hey, can I leave?" And then now the boss is like, "Well, yeah, that's fine. Absolutely." And then now it's on the boss to solve it. She just did all of this herself. And I feel like, again, the entitlement, which is dangerous because I feel like I'm guilty of this as well in America, of just like, we just do what we want whenever we want all the time. And there's great freedom in that, but it's also hard to run a business with people that act like that don't take pride in like, this is an important job that someone needs to cover and we need you to carry your weight,
Yeah, I mean, I love that story. I've had similar stories, in my experience, of that same type of thing. I mean, it reminds me of like, at Textbook, one of the easiest ways for, let's say, one of our painters, one of our crew members to get let go, is when they, have the attitude and let us know about it, that like, if I got paid more, I would care more. And it's just, unfortunately, like let's call it what it is. Like there's team members that feel that way, but it's like, at least don't make it obvious. Where with again, I can think of a lot of examples where our team members in the Philippines, like, the amount of care is not correlated to the amount of pay in the same way that, we're used to or whatever.
100% agree. So now getting back to, you're about to dive into tools, processes, whatever, to manage these VAs, remote employees.
Yeah.
Got a lot of them doing in my mind.
Yeah, right. Glad I can help. So, so one of the things I think this kind of goes back to is out of sight, out of mind. I think is what people, what many managers, business owners would be afraid of. You kind of alluded to that or mentioned that before. So one of the things that we do, we use Slack as like our internal communication. There's tons of them. It doesn't matter. It could be Teams, so many different, chat platforms. So we use Slack again, but what we require is all of our remote employees to send in a beginning of day report and an end of day report. So, at 9 a.m., they just fill, basically they, in one channel, they're letting us know, these are the things that I'm going to be working on today. These are the projects. These are the things I'm monitoring. Again, whatever their role is.
They do that daily?
Daily. And it's, most of it is probably just copy and paste. A lot of what we're looking for is, you're signed in, you're accessible, you're ready to go. Like we can see that you're on Slack. So if we've got a question, we know that, you're there. It's almost like they're clocking in a way, right? Yep. Without actually clocking in. And then at the end of the day, the same thing happens. I would say the end of day report is more important. We ask them to like rate their busyness from a 0 to 5. 5 meaning like I'm kind of on, way stressed. I have way too much stuff to do. That helps us to know, are they getting bored? Are they overworked? It's kind of like a quick.
What's like a good comfortable number? Is 3 like?
That's where almost every day it's like a 3. Somewhere like most day, 95% of days are like 3 to 3.5 is the answer.
Yeah.
Whether now it's all they might. Right, like there's many employees that are, would never tell you they're bored, or other employees that would never tell you that they're overworked. So, that might not be like the greatest way of getting that information, but that's something that we do as part of that. And then I'm just looking for a handful of bullet points of like, what are the things that you spent your time on? And to be honest with you, like I'm not using it to check. I don't look at it all the time. I'm certainly not going in there and saying like, oh, that like you only worked 6 hours today based on these bullet points. Like that is not the point of it. Right. It's more or less just like an open-ended communication. If they've got a problem with something, they're stuck on something, that's an opportunity for them to, have somewhere to put that.
Definitely.
So I would encourage that for anybody that is looking to hire somebody overseas. That can be a really easy way to make sure that you're not going days and days and days without communicating. The way that our team is structured, so our first person we hired, her name is Erna, and she's a rock star. And so she was originally hired as a recruiting coordinator. All she did was, take all the applicants we get through Indeed and go through them, filter them, message out to them, schedule them for interviews. Once somebody got hired, she would send them the background check information, and like that was like very much her role. And then as she showed competency and great whatever work ethic and all the things, we started to say, oh well, you're good at this, like maybe you could help in this way, and what are some other skills that you have based on past experiences, how could you help? And it didn't take that long, and her role just kept evolving. And now she is basically, one of her main responsibilities is she's in charge of the other 3 remote employees. So she's the one who's mostly, looking at these reports now, so that, frees me up from having to necessarily do that all the time.
I was going to ask, so she's managing these reports of the daily check-ins and stuff like that.
Yep.
One question I would have, and this is not because I haven't implemented this for the people that I manage, but I'm curious just from my own this is a challenge of lots of processes. Do you have a solution to prevent these from getting stale? Or like you said, it's probably copy and paste. Or a better example, I'm going to analogy is with Zapier, which I used all the time in my past job. And obviously now we implement and help people with this, but I was adamant about error messages are like a big deal, and we need to address the core problem or the root cause of that error message, even if it's like, oh, it's just because there was an email blank and it's just telling us there was no email, so there's nothing to do here because they didn't put it in email. And I was like, the reason that that's so dangerous is because all of a sudden you're getting like error message, error message, error message, and you're like, oh, doesn't matter. Oh, doesn't matter.
Don't
Oh,
even look
doesn't
at it.
matter. And then you just don't pay attention to error messages anymore because 98% of them don't matter.
Right.
And all of a sudden there's one that's like, hey, your core Zap is not functioning and it is turned off. And we're just like, oh, doesn't matter. And you just go on with your day. And then it's like, no, stop everything. Like, red alert, go do this. And so I feel like the same thing is true with Slack messages on those recurring things. I've been in, and it wasn't in Slack, it was Basecamp, I think, is one I used. This was like probably 5-6 years ago. But I remember we had those, like, what are you working on today? And everyone was super pumped for the first week. And then the second week, and then the third week, we're like not quite as excited about it. And then it's like all of a sudden, either nobody's doing it or whatever. But I don't know if there is a solution other than like mixing it up or changing it or doing like a sprint where we're going to do this for a couple weeks and then we're going to do it once a month and then we're going to go back to a couple weeks. I don't know. I just feel like there has to be. I haven't been able to come up with a solution. I'm just curious if you have.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great solution. I could see like being guilty, right? Like where somebody could put something in their update and, nobody read it, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
This place sucks and nobody even read it or whatever, right? That's a test. But I will say this is that like, even though it's not like they're not my direct report, right? So Erna reports to me, the other 3 team members report to Erna, if you will.
Yeah.
The other 3 team members, I can see their daily updates and I will occasionally like make a comment on it. Well, I will actually have read like word for word, and I'll comment specific to something in there like, hey, thank you so much for doing this, or I've got a question about that other thing. Could you explain this in a little more detail? And I do think that one, that shows that like I'm paying attention, that I like am valuing this information, even if I'm not doing that every day. I think it hopefully gives them the understanding that like, if they don't take it seriously, that might be the one that I actually spend the time to dive into.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's a solution, but I think that might be one way to avoid some of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's definitely a concern.
What else, what other like, because what I love about kind of the way this podcast is turning into, what else would you say for like implementing remote employees for dummies? Like here's the key process, which I would say so far what we've identified is have a well-defined job that you're going to give this person, and then Slack or some sort of communication channel to check in at a regular occurrence with some, feedback loop of here's what I'm doing, here's my day, whatever, here's what I did. I love those things. What else would you say is like has been key in your success with remote employees?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would think, so the first, like, I think is having a like standard operating procedure. Like, what are they supposed to be doing? For me, like the main reason I wanted to hire people overseas wasn't because I wanted to save money, although that's a great, byproduct. But it was really because I had to get better as a company. We had to get better at like documenting our processes and finding the flaws and making the jobs like scalable, if you will, right? And not just like one person has all the information, and if they ever left, like we got to start over. And my thought was, if we hire people remotely, we're gonna like it will never work, which is true, if we don't have like their job documented. And so that was the impetus. Was like, it was almost like, I want to lose weight, so I'm paying for the gym membership, because once I pay for it, I know I'm going to actually have to go to the gym, or else I'm going to feel like an idiot.
Yeah.
And so like that was my thought of just like, we're doing it. We're hiring somebody overseas because that's going to force me to document that job, and that's what happened. And then by doing that, we actually started to get like okay at documenting jobs, and we're getting better and better and better at it. So some of the things that we use to do that, we use Notion as our like database, if you will, as to like where do all these things go. I think you could easily do it in a Google Drive. Notion, I think I try to be like somewhat software agnostic because these things change all the time, but I think Notion is great right now for the ease of use and a lot of different reasons.
What would you say? Because I have heard of Notion. I have had developers use Notion on projects to keep things organized. Describe Notion in like by describing other common apps that people are familiar with. Like it's kind of like this, or it has the feature of this app. Because I'm assuming it looks, on one hand, you can make it look like a Word document, but there's a lot more stuff going on than just a Google Doc, right? What other
Yeah.
aspects or features are you like, oh, this is really, I love that you can search or check things or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, search functionality, it's somewhat like a Wikipedia type of an idea where, to me, I think it's like what makes it cool is it's almost like you're building a website where, the way a website works in, very basic is like you click on the link and it takes you to the page. And that's very similar in Notion, except it takes like no coding ability. I mean, if you can use, Word or Google Docs, you can create stuff in Notion. And then the other thing that's really nice is you can embed all sorts of, rich media stuff, pictures, videos, and things like that. And it's very easy to make it like visually appealing. Again, more in line with like a very basic website, like look, than compared to like a very, just like that text editor Word document that's very plain and, stale.
I am curious. You can easily say no if this is going to take too long. I'm curious if you could show or share your screen, and if not, I'll have the editor cut this part out. But could just to show like, here's an example of what you can do here that you can't do elsewhere. Is that easy to pull up?
Yeah, let me just open Notion real fast.
So I'm curious, is Notion, for you guys are using this to organize like when you're saying you're creating SOPs and documenting jobs, is this like, I'm thinking that it would be like a manual. So if I'm an employee, I'm going in and I look at the like how to be a receptionist, and it's like the receptionist job title, and then it's got links to all the things that I do in my job, and then I can click on those links and it opens further details on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep, exactly. I'm going to share my screen. I know for people that are listening, that's not going to be helpful. I'll try to describe it as we go, I guess. But
yeah, but if you are on Spotify or YouTube, you could look up and see what he's sharing. For those of you listening on those two platforms.
Okay,
yep,
looks like that's loaded now. So this is, kind of a pretty good example of like how this can work. So we've got this like home page where we store everything, right? So this is almost like the first place, like the main database. Now, not everybody's going to have access to all of these pages, but the way that we like to have it set up is it just has this little generic like who are we, and then we've got all these different resources in here, and then one of my I'll show this as an example. So here's a role that we have overseas, sales coordinator or sales assistant. This was created by the sales coordinator. So part of every team member's job is to like update their Notion page and keep it current. Nice. And I think that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice to anybody hiring overseas talent is you don't have to be great at documenting the entire job to get started. Like Job number one for your first person should be to document their job.
Yep.
And they can do that by, interviewing the owner or interviewing the person who's currently doing those tasks and creating the database. And that's one of the skills.
Question would be, do you have so let's give these people names. You've got Erna, who started with you, and is she the one that when you hired her to document processes, were you having her interview the other people and then she's doing it, or you're saying that someone would ask Erna what she does and then that's helping her document her own job? Like everybody's doing it themselves and recording screen recordings or making screenshots or whatever?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, both. I mean, I think it just, it is a very fluid thing. There's certainly parts in here where you're going to hear my voice, where I go in and record a Loom video and put it into, the Notion database on like, here's how I want things done. And then there's other parts where, somebody else in the company has documented that. So, certainly, I would say it's like, whomever's role it is to do a certain task, they need to make sure that that the page in Notion is up to date with the most accurate way of doing it. Does that happen perfectly all the time? No, of course not. Right? We're not. We all have jobs to do, and it's not just keeping these up to date.
But there's a significant change, or maybe monthly, quarterly, annually. You're like, hey, just go make sure that there's nothing that's like grossly old, outdated, right?
Right. And that's what used to happen all the time. So we had these, documents in Google Docs, and Google Drive, documents, whatever, and they were just like, just like a paper binder, if you will, just put up on a shelf, and that was that. And somebody else would come in, that somebody's in that role for 2 or 3 years, and then, whatever they leave, we need to replace them. And it's just like, oh yeah, let's go find that how-to document. It's like, oh, we don't even have this software anymore. Oh man, we got to start all over.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we've, are hopefully doing a better job with Notion. And so anyway,
a question I have is that you have one of these pages for each role in the business. If you have multiple people in the same role, someone takes the lead, or they're the managers, or whoever is the person that owns this.
Yep.
So it's not like split out a bunch of I thought you were updating that.
No. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And so what's cool about Notion, I think is you can put this text box within the page. You can put these headers or sections in here. These are all links to other pages where you can see whatever they would be about. And then you can even put tables in here. You can embed videos, pictures, all sorts of different things to help somebody understand whatever it is. But I think especially for documenting processes like standard operating procedure, I think Notion works really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What other, or I guess question on just the process itself, do you more frequently, you can stop sharing, but yeah, do you more frequently do screen recordings or screenshots, or does it, I guess, depends? Which one do you encourage more?
So yeah, I like a combination. I think there's a time and place for both. I think for somebody who's new coming in, watching Loom videos is really helpful because you get the full soup to nuts, which I know is one of your favorite phrases, ideas of how is this done. But then as you are doing the job, maybe it's month 2 in the job, there's going to be times where you need to reference back, but you don't need to watch the whole video. I know 80%, but I forget, what is that one, where do I go again? And that's where maybe having some screenshots or just written text, I think, can be very helpful and a little bit quicker to access. So I would say, again, we're not perfect, but an ideal how-to document is going to include at least 2 of those things. And so we love to use Loom for screen recordings, and then a software that we use less, Loom I would say is the main one. Another one that we use is called Tango. And Tango, yeah, so Tango is pretty cool. For anyone that's not familiar, is it basically it's recording it's taking screenshots as you do a task. And so you could easily just do that yourself and just like do a screen, take a screenshot and then explain, like you click on that button right here in the upper right, and Tango just makes that like really clean and
it
easy.
turns like a 30-minute documentation process into however long the process takes you to do it.
And it's like, that's what's cool about Loom and Tango. That combination is deadly because it's like, you don't have to, there is no such thing as documenting the task. It's just do the task
Yes.
with this happening. It kind of goes back at the very beginning of this conversation, we said like just recording everything. Like that's all you're doing is just do whatever it is you're doing on the computer and like turn on Loom. And if you want, you can do it both at the same time and turn on Tango, and it's like there. You don't even have to.
I was gonna say I wish they had both, but just do both.
I guess you can. I don't know. I usually do it twice.
I was gonna say that it does make sense because I was thinking if only Loom did what Tango did, and then you just have the video or the document.
Yeah.
But I have also heard that, like for those of you listening that have not looked at Tango, like you should definitely, it's app.tango or tango.us is the website. But it is like like the first time you see it, it's like, oh my gosh. Like because I used to at Webfoot, I would take screenshots of like, here's what you need to do when you win a job for like the sales team to follow. And it would take, like, I would legitimately, there was one that was pretty detailed, but there was like an hour of work that I took to like make it all perfect and everything. And you have to screenshot and then take the screenshot into a little Mac, photo editor and add stuff. And with Tango, I was like, I literally could have done this hour-long task in 5 minutes and been done. But I didn't know about it back then.
And you're in your CRM and you're like, oh man, I don't know that I want to have like the customer's like phone number showing up on the like, how-to document. And it's like Tango makes it so easy. You just click the blur tool or whatever, and it's just like done. Like it's so easy. Yeah, and you can zoom in on like different things. It is pretty incredible.
Yeah. What other tools? I think documentation is key. It's another great tip. What else you got?
Yeah, certainly like some AI like translation stuff I think is helpful. One of the easiest ways to do this is just to be interviewed, and like have like the VA or whomever, or again overseas talent, but it's like just interview somebody in the business and like, okay, like how do you do this, even when it's not a like computer based task, because that's everything we talked about so far works on a computer.
Yeah.
But not everything happens on a computer, right? Like, how do you answer the phone? It's like I can show you where to click, but I can't show you how to like what to say. And that's where like using a whatever's your favorite thing, but like a Zoom video or Google Meet, and then like an AI transcription to like pull that out and record the call, pull that out, and then throw that into your chat GPT if you want and have it cleaned up a little bit. Like those are some ways that you can really start to get like ninja level, if you will, where you're starting to combine overseas talent, artificial intelligence, and some of these available tools. I think can make documenting processes not so scary.
Yeah. Any other processes or like framework for someone that's trying to get into the VA space?
I would say, one of the biggest challenges that we had, and I think a lot of people run into, is time zone. That's a common concern. It is a real concern. I would say it's less of a concern than, you might think or whatever. But we've had, I think, 2 of our team members that no longer work with us. It was mostly because of time zone. So, we're on East Coast here in Cleveland. Philippines is generally, exactly 12 hours ahead. Yeah. I think I can't remember. With daylight savings, it changes by an hour.
Yeah.
But so, that's a challenge, right? We require right now for all of our roles a full overlap of work time. So we're asking our team members to work essentially the graveyard shift from 9 p.m. local their time to 5 a.m. local Philippines time, which is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. our time. And that's hard when you're screening for candidates. Those are the things that you're looking for, just like you would, for any local talent. Are you going to be able to work the shift? Not all roles require full overlap. certainly some roles, maybe, marketing, creative type roles, or, accounting, bookkeeping kind of roles that are not customer facing. You might not require that. You just have to be careful that there is enough time for like internal communication. I get really frustrated when, if I'm working with a vendor or, an overseas team member, if our schedules aren't lining up, and, we like that conversation is just taking too long. Hey, I need to see an edit
Wait
to
12
this.
hours for a response. They respond back. The next morning you reply. Yeah, just like,
Like,
okay.
let's just get on a Zoom call, and in a half hour, we're just gonna like knock out this, whatever flyer that we're working on or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that's helpful, and those are things that you should think through as you're looking to hire people overseas. But it's also like it's never going to be perfect, and you're just going to work through it as you go.
Yeah. And I would say that like just another perspective on the hours, we have 4 VAs, and I think they all have different shifts a little bit, and we try to be flexible, especially once someone has proved. I started with all of them like, hey, I need you to work when I'm working. But once you have mastered what we're having you do, because most of ours are not customer facing, I'm like, I'm open to, and we even talk about this in the job interview, we can shift schedules, but I need to make sure that either in the morning or the afternoon, we have a consistent time that I know I can throw something on the calendar and have a 98% chance that we'll be able to connect on a Zoom call if I need something. So that helps eliminate some of the pain with like the time zone difference. But the other thing that was like a hidden superpower with the time zone change, like, because as I do automation implementation for people, I would get emails from people like 4 p.m. my time. They're like, "Hey, I don't think this is broken or it's not working," and normally I'd be like, "Ugh, here goes," and it's like hunkering down into like a
Dinner.
fun night of like my dinner plans are ruined or whatever. But guess who just woke up at 4 p.m. like the Philippines did? And so now like my dream scenario is, or what we're currently in is I have someone manage my email. And so every single email that comes in, she looks at it first and she sees if she can delegate it to the correct team or team member. And then like in this case of an error, like I don't even, first of all, I don't look at my email ever at all for any reason, and she'll Vox me if there's something that's important. And then some, well, I guess if she says you need to go reply to this, then I'll jump into my email to do just that thing. But oftentimes, like the next day will go by at work, and like I go back and see that there was a thread in Slack, and they were just solving problems through the night. And the next morning, the client had a solution solved in their inbox at 7 a.m. And it's like they told us about it at 4 p.m. and it was able to get done overnight, and it's working perfectly the next day. So again, depending on the role, that time zone can actually be a huge hack and an improvement to what you'd alternatively have here, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just curious. What are your tools? Like, give me some of the things that you would say are like your couple favorite things to work with overseas.
I would say we use Slack. We use Vidyard instead of Loom. Previously, we had well, not previously, this is currently when we started hiring VAs, we just made a Google Doc and it just called it VA tasks. And we just went through, I was going to share my screen, but there's passwords and stuff in this document, so I'm not doing that. But it's literally just like hyperlinks to Vidyard videos. So it's like we grouped them into like an outline of like these types of tasks, these types of tasks. And now this document that started with it's a simple Google Doc. There's now 5 pages of processes that over time have been built out. And it's incredible when like we've had turnover with our video editor who edits, our people that edit video podcasts. It's a part-time job, so it's kind of tough to really get someone bought into the team. But now like a new person comes on and it's like, hey, go watch the video first and then ask D if you have questions. And if you still have questions, then ask me, and then I'll see if we need to solve this. But that's the big thing, I think, is my process or hack would be more of like the documentation thing. I think is probably the most important. Like, yes, have a job role or know what you want them to do. But I think if you have, and I think like you said, someone had told us this too, you don't have to be like an expert documenter, but just like if you want someone to do your QuickBooks like reconciliation, like how often do you do that? I do it once a month. Okay, great. When you do it next, just sit down, start recording, and just talk to the screen about what you're doing. Just say, why did you click there? What made you do that? And it's like, record it. And then people will be like, oh, well, that's sometimes there's different. Okay, great. When that sometimes comes up, which didn't come up in the like first 3 attempts of you doing this, like just record that at a later time when your VA has a question they don't know how to handle what your video covered, you know? So it's like it can be an evolving thing that just gets better. And then the other hack of delegate to the team to then re-record the process, I think is also big. And to be honest, we have not done that a lot. I love what you shared about everybody owns their like space and they go through. I would say here's a really big one. I would say as far as just a process or like a culture thing. Natalie, twice a month we just do a team meeting, and the team meeting is basically like we have an icebreaker question that Natalie comes up with. That's like, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? Or if we were in a zombie apocalypse, what would be your most valuable skill? Just like silly stuff. So we do that, and then we have good news for like personal, and then good news for business in the last 2 weeks. And at that point, with 6 people on the call, it takes probably like 25, 30 minutes. And I remember the first 3 or 4 meetings, I was just like, I have so much stuff to do. Like, and we're just talking about zombie apocalypse. Like, this is just driving me crazy. But then what happened was we have one-on-ones with our VAs. And so every 2 weeks we have, if Natalie manages them or I manage them, we have one-on-ones. And every like over the course of time, every single employee that we have said that one of the things that they really appreciated about our business was that, first of all, we do these team meetings are video calls, so we're all there, everyone's laughing together, we can all see each other's faces. I am a big advocate of always having cameras on, just like see the person you're working with. But every single one of them said like they just felt like we cared and they trusted us more, and it was fun because they actually knew their employees. I think subconsciously we all think that because there's 2 employees that we hired in the Philippines that they're like best friends, but I think we think that they are best friends because they're both from the Philippines. That's like if someone was like, oh, Michael, and there's Sarah in California, and you're like, no, I have not. Like, do you have any context of what you're talking about? And I think that's the like having that meeting was huge, and I think that also provides some stickiness to that employee. And since then, I've made jokes that if someone's gonna like walk out and leave the job, I want them to feel like they're leaving their best friend behind.
Sure.
Like I don't want it's if the person that and I've had this happen a number of times where people say their remote employee just ghosted them, and I'm like, yeah, because like how many times are you in just like a random Facebook Messenger chat and you just ignore that and never talk to that person again because you don't know them, So I think those would be my biggest pieces of advice.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. I'll just real quick, I know we got to wrap up, but one of the things that we did to that end is we have like a company-wide meeting where we get all our painters, all our crew members together in person once a month. And one of the first things like early on, I think it was month 2 with Erna, we brought her up on a Zoom call on the TV in front of the entire company. And we had a video facing out to the company, or a camera, I should say, to the company, so she could see some of the the team. And I was basically asking her questions like, tell us about yourself. What's it like to live in the Philippines? What's the weather like? What's the food like? Right? All the things that you would want to know. I think that was one of the best things that we have done, so that she could be bought into like where she was working, and so that our team could see like, who is this person that I see messaging me or whatever. But,
yeah. Awesome. Well, Michael, it's super fun. Thank you for coming on. We didn't even get to the cool AI tools and stuff, so we're going to have to do another conversation about that. But once again, it's always fun chatting with you, and thank you for being generous with your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Chris.